Hello,
Me
and you're
agreeing to recording. Hello, everybody. This is the GCC. We have Glenn Glassland. Stacy is in the house. Colin is here. Do we have Sam Hahn? Let's see. I see his beautiful face. It looks like a portrait. Who drew that? Is that his dog? We don't know. Welcome to the GCC. Go ahead, Doug.
so.
Well,
Did you ever do radio, Josh?
I did a little bit of voiceover work, and I was terrible at it because I'm over the top. I'm out there like I'm too over the top, Doug. I tried.
I understand.
I did
So
a radio station in New York for about a year, and then the licensing agreements, I forgot what it was called, but it was a server, and you could run it, and then all of a sudden the license agreement came in, and it killed me. It just killed, and that's why I went underground hip hop, because I had all the licenses to all the music, because I made it. And then my friends made it, and they're like, yeah, dude, put it on the radio. And cool, yeah, I don't care. So, yep,
welcome,
I tried the radio.
welcome, Alex. So we're going to kick off, and I'd love to invite some check-ins just to see where everybody is at, whether anybody is feeling a particular block this morning. It's not required. Go ahead,
I have a
Josh.
check-in, if that's okay.
Sure.
My check-in is wondering, how are you doing with this weather? Because I know you're in a cold part, and if anyone else is in a cold area, Glenn, how are you doing? And especially Colin, how's it going up there in Canada? Like, what's the weather like up there? So my check-in is to say, I hope everybody's okay with this next round of frozen warming. And I'm complete.
I'll go. So this is my check-in and my unblocking in one. So yesterday, I went to barn raising, which I think everybody there would say that it was a very productive meeting. It seemed like, things were moving in a very good direction, according to what people have said they've wanted to see more of. That's just my opinion. But Glenn asked a question that I didn't get to answer because it wouldn't have been in line with what was being talked about. And we ran out of time, so I didn't get a chance to check out. But he asked what everybody's working on or wants to work on. I may be paraphrasing a little bit. And the truth is, I feel like I'm in a very unique position because what I want to do and what I do is since I've joined here, I've probably spent well over 100 hours on phone calls with different members of the conversational community. I mean, sometimes it's been reciprocal, but many times it's been just holding their hand or being with them as they work through certain issues, being a sounding board, holding the space. And I think that's very important, but it's not something that we're used to putting a value on in society. The other part of that equation is that I want to be in the room where I can add an idea. And I know I grew up with the notion, and I think many people have, that it's the doing that's of value and not the ideas so much, because, we always say everybody has an opinion, but that doesn't mean that everybody has a good opinion or good ideas. And I've been told many times that I do have a way of looking at things with a different perspective and maybe adding something that hasn't been offered before. But I feel like it puts me in a difficult position because that's basically what I want to do, which isn't something that has like a beginning point and an ending point. And it's not something that it's either some people really see a value in it and some people see no value in it. And that's good because it's a guideline for me of where to gravitate to. But I was like trying to figure out how to express what it is I want to do. So I don't know if I just did that now, hopefully. And with that, I'm complete.
So is there a dimension in that you're I'm not quite sure where the block is because it sounds like you're in the groove of what you do.
I think the block is feeling badly about it. Like I'm not doing enough.
That I can recognize in myself as well, yeah.
Stacey, I was going to say, dare I say the word support again? Meaning that's what I'd like to do is support more people, not just each other. I love supporting each other. I want to do more supporting of each other and supporting of you. If there's some of the people that are really getting value out of it, I would like to support and focus on those people so they keep getting value out of it. And the ones that aren't, there's 14 other communities. Maybe we can share some place where they do get value in those places so that everybody is supported. But I do think it's kind of I don't know if it's a bad word or a word that people don't want to embrace, but I love the word support. Like if we just called GCC a support group, I'd be happy. I'm curious if that's a block for other people, what other people think about saying, hey, if you need some support, come here. You might not get it from everybody in the group, but there'll be certain people that might want to support you. Maybe Stacy might want to, maybe Colin might want to, maybe I might want to support you. So what do other people think about that word, or is there a better word or a better frame or narrative around that? I'm curious, Stacy.
Well, I want to leave check-ins to complete before we get into sort of meat and potatoes. So can we just?
Yeah, can I just say one thing just to clarify? I'll be quick. I just want to say it's not just support. I also do want to be able to input ideas. So it's not just support. I do want to be able to give ideas of different ways to look at things. Thanks, Doug.
Alex, we were doing a round of check-ins.
I put a word in the chat, mentor. A mentor is a bit like a tutor, masterclass, or another member of the tribe. How do you mentor a coach? How do you mentor a mentor? So we could have a mentor session, or perhaps we could unpack that a little bit later. But yes, projects are thick and fast on the table, and we've got this jigsaw puzzle, which is interesting. You put your finger on one of the pieces, and it glows and shows you some links coming off it. And so you can move it around like a bungee board and get it in the right place. It could have a strange attractor, so that it looks at the keywords of other pieces on the board and it gets drawn towards them with feelers. Can you imagine an organism doing that if you're coaching it to learn something? It would be a bit weird, but a sci-fi movie. Over.
Colin, do you have a check-in for you?
Yeah, I think what Stacy's getting at would be an interesting topic. I don't know. I haven't heard any other ones. How we feel, how aligned we feel. I think Stacy and I talked a bit as well about some of the things I was working on, some of the things she's working on. They all sounded pretty reasonable, but how do you take it out of the greenhouse out into the garden? How do you got a sprout, but how do you get it to grow up into something bigger? I think that's a metaphor we use here, or analogy of the sprouting. Is it not, Doug? I think that's one of your favorites. So I think if you have your pod or your project, you could consider it a sprout that, everybody knows that this is your thing you're trying to bring, and they'll help. Tammy's got the alphabet code. Alex has got the P to P thing. The Glenn's a summarizing writer. So that question you're asking should be more evident. But what are you doing with your writings this week? Like, Glenn's done a series of walking and talking. That was very interesting, and I fed back. So yeah, we can all offer if we know what people are into. So that's what's frustrating for me, is to try to find that consistency as opposed to just general talking. And I'm looking for models and ways to improve being understood, I think, is the word I'm coming down to. I think Sam's is coexistence. Doug's is value, and probably much more than that. Value doing things a new way, not following old paradigms. I think, so when I'm talking with Doug or when I'm talking with Sam, I have to maybe use a little different adapter. So I'm not using the trigger words that, Doug's told me before. No, if you're talking about what you're doing, why don't we call it a work? So now when I talk to Doug about something of value I have, I might just say, well, I'm working on this work, instead of trying to call it something else. He'll know what I mean right away. So I think having that common language and getting to know people and what their sprout is, what they're trying to grow, then you can be more sensitive to what the needs are in that context. So that's very concrete when you've come down to say, this is what I'm growing, as opposed to, I'd like to go to the gardening store and look for things to grow this week. I really feel like I should be growing things. That's in that support level. Like, well, where is there a store, and how do we go around and align with who it is, what I'm trying to do? Am I in a good place in life to try to do this? Who are my mentors? That's a beautiful thing. So, and I think it's always a two-way street once you get going, because nobody's the expert, really. You're all, especially in this kind of a forum, we're kind of experimenting. So I think we do need to be clear on this word. Anyway, I'm rambling, but I think it's a valuable topic to come back upon for value for what we're doing, and possibly highlighting people who aren't actually here, that are kind of on the second level of the group, to get them interested to come back in, or at least give highlights of what they're doing. I don't know. There's a lot of work to be done.
So so true to the unblocking meme, I don't personally have any fears, doubts, or questions about the value of me in service to all of the things that I do or touch or contribute to. So I'm not experiencing the block, Stacy, that you alluded to, and that Glenn obviously resonated for Glenn as well. But I do feel, I would like to feel into, and I do have curiosity about it. Less the immediate of how or what you're doing that's in service to, or the what that you're contributing, than the sort of the fear or anxiety that's attaching behind it, underlying that wanting to either do more or contribute more. Because in order to if that's an emotionally charged feeling or reaction that you're left with, then it's obviously an internally directed judgment, right? If I'm sort of going, am I enough? have I contributed enough? Is my value meaningful enough for others? Underlying that is, am I enough? There is judgment in that.
Yes and no.
Okay.
because where that might have been the judgment the first part of my existence, at this point the judgment is on, does society recognize that we need something more? Does society recognize that we're a world full of broken people? Does society recognize that? I mean, it's great if you have a great mom and a great family, but look how many people are alone in this world. And it's what I see, it's the really creative people that are able and capable of doing great things that need that assistance. So if I could be there for those people, I feel very valuable about doing it. It's when I'm put in the spotlight and I have to verbalize that, and I recognize that there's a whole bunch of people that don't see the value. I think at this point I'm judging them. I'm not judging myself anymore. I had somebody that I probably spent at least 20 hours on the phone with, working through certain issues that they were going through with with people that they were working with. And at a later date, not only at a later date, I heard something where that let me know that none of that time that I had put in had been valued. And that was like, wow.
Glenn?
Yeah. Did you hear me okay? Okay. Yes. So I'd like to follow a little bit up on that, what Stacy brought, and also Colin and Josh. And I guess this is also kind of a check-in / a little block. But I can also recognize that a part of my personal vision includes supporting others. Let's call them even the cultural creatives. This expression was used once by Stacey. I think she's kind of referring a little bit to that. And at the same time, of course, I'm also sort of one of them. So I do have a very strong wish during these kind of meetings to add ideas and refine ideas and to really co-create something live during the conversation. And in a way where it's kind of like we're all working as one mind, and we sort of build on what we bring, and each brings what they want to bring, and are really free to express anything they want to bring, and even if it's far out, and also if there could be an atmosphere where it was really where you really feel that it's okay to build on whatever someone else has brought, so that there isn't this sense of ownership of any idea. If there is any ownership, it's an ownership simply of my presence, my way of being. In that sense, that's the only place ownership gives any meaning for me in the context of these kinds of conversations. But in terms of the ideas that are created out of it, that seems to be an obstacle. So this is okay. So that's something I want to do, and have wanted to do a long time. And I also get an impression that at least some others also want to do this kind of work. So where is the block? Is there a block? Well, the one thing I would mention is something Jess Winder has brought up several times, and I mentioned it briefly yesterday, and that is that sometimes during these kind of conversations, we can get into this habit of long monologues without, daring to interrupt one another, so that person throws out many ideas that sort of hang in the air, and then you never really get a time to follow through on them. So it's kind of like you're putting up lots of ideas in the air, but no one picks it up. So at the end, it just falls on the floor, and then a few weeks later, the same thing happens again, and it's sort of the same things just repeat themselves. And that maybe it would be more interesting to sort of really follow through at least on one of the ideas, and really try to understand and grok, is this expression Sam has mentioned, what the person really means. So that, like, if I could really know what the people in this room most want to do now, or are really interested in now, then that would be interesting for me. So that would be really valuable time. And if we could also do it co-creatively, it would be even more valuable still. But I guess then there is this, I guess there has to be a sense of trust and a little bit of boldness as well, and playfulness, so that it's allowed to interrupt, it's allowed to say something far out, and it's done in a context where, it's kind of taken for granted that it's all good, and we're all here to create something beautiful together. So I guess maybe the block is that the format of these conversations sometimes seem a little bit formal, a little bit restrictive, a little bit too much of one person speaks at a time, and then they say, now I'm complete. And yeah, you get what I'm saying. Yeah, Jess Winders brought this up several times as well, and I think I basically feel much the same as him there. I mean, it's by the way, I always find these meetings quite valuable, even if it is a little frustrating sometimes to have all this stuff hanging in the air. It's still valuable, so it shows that, there's something essentially very valuable about just meeting and considering these things together. But I wonder if it could be a lot more valuable still if we could really co-create something together and really have fun with it, and where everyone can really feel more free. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, and I hope that made some sense. I think it builds on some of the things that others have mentioned as well. So yeah.
Josh?
I'm just signaling a thumbs up for Glenn and saying, I hear you, I'm listening, I'm with you. That's all I'm doing. So sorry my camera's so crappy. I'm trying to save the bandwidth, actually. So I've got nothing other than I hear him and I hear everybody, and I'm just listening.
There's usually pretty good feedback when you put up a card on Trello. If you have an idea that you want to get developed or unpacked.
Of course, one question then occurs to me is whether the Trello board is followed up and used actively. for example, included in a conversation? That's also an interesting question.
Yes. I think we have an agreement problem. If we have a better way of better way of reaching productive agreements, that would overcome some of the obstacles that seem to arise in the group from time to time.
I'm trying to feel into the common territory between Stacy, what you shared, and what Glenn shared. And I guess also sort of inquire into with both of you to go a little deeper. So Stacy, what was the net for you on realization that here you had made this massive investment of time and attention, and for the person on the receiving end, it was all for naught? Like,
Well, for me, in that case, I just realized that that's not a person that I'm going to invest my time in. But if I could just ask Glenn a question to get to what you said, because I'm not sure either. But Glenn, what I heard, I'm not sure if I heard it. Is there a part of you that sometimes like holds back, like what you just said now? Is that something that normally you wouldn't have said in terms of the way we're formatted and things like that? And is that part of the block that it's not always easy to insert those ideas?
Yeah, I always hold back a lot, which of course is quite natural. And it's maybe even a healthy thing to, you can't say everything at once. So you kind of need to choose. You have to consider time and attention, many factors. But yeah, I mean, for sure, very often there's so much more that you feel could be put in at just this point, relevant inputs, which you really feel could be valuable to the other person in the room. But then, the flow just moves on, and then it's suddenly you're on to the next thing and the next thing. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely an element of it. And to do with time and space, I guess, as well. And yeah.
So Doug, does that sort of make that connection between the two for you a little bit?
well, no, the piece of the puzzle that I'm more drawn to, and that I have more curiosity about, is part of what I hear in Glenn's share is the default is to not. The default position is to hold his powder and to not interject or to not interrupt or to not to speak up, right? So in that is also Glenn's sensing mechanism and orientation toward the engagement, the form, the context of these Zoom sessions, the people, the place. He alluded to the protocol being a little bit formal and a little bit stiff. One person talks and, everybody else is quiet. And if that person runs too long, then you have the Gertrude thing, which is, one bite at a time, please, to create opening and opportunities for other people to contribute and add to the flow. Your version of that in your share, to my mind, was in your sensing mechanism, presumably you felt you were being valuable every minute of those 20 hours. And lo and behold, your take on your value to that person was off. Like, with benefit of hindsight, there was nobody home, or somebody where he wasn't catching, she wasn't catching. And And, you know, you wouldn't have done it for 20 hours if you didn't believe it wasn't being a valuable or in service to somebody else. So your judgmental, you know, mechanism, you know, where I would end up at the end of that, and God knows, by the way, you're preaching to the choir, I've given away, you know, hundreds and hundreds and if not thousands of hours of time in service to folks for whom it was not in service. Took a long time for me to, at least for me to learn that the fact that I recognize my value add to them doesn't mean that they want it, need it, or are interested in it. And so I lost all attachments to my end of that equation and have shifted significantly, you know, my attention and focus on whether people want help, whether they want support, whether they want value I might be able to provide or not, as a focus, you know, and 99% of the time, you know, the answer is probably no, because they've got their own thing going. But they're both faculties. That's the thing that's, you know, Glenn's internal judgmental faculty, your internal judgmental faculty. And how do we do that when we come together, right? Like, how does that work when I've got mine going on, you got yours going on, he's got his, and they're all different. And each one of us has more or less stuff of our own on arrival that we may or may not, like Glenn said, I want to bring ideas, I want to generate and contribute to the creation of, which is a whole preconceived orientation on arrival. Like I walk in and I'm completely blank. I don't have any expectation. I don't have any aspiration about anything coming out the back end. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm complete.
Well, I just want to add, there's also one other way to look at certain things. Sometimes just because a person doesn't recognize a value, that doesn't mean that a value wasn't given and that a change did result in it. So it might just be where the credit was put in a different direction, and that's fine too. You know, when somebody puts money in your parking meter, it really doesn't matter who put the money in. You didn't get a ticket. So the person who put in the money, the stranger, doesn't care. They don't expect to ever get the credit anyway.
You know, there are times when people don't realize the value they're getting. I remember a homeless guy asking for a few dollars so he could get the bus back to his hometown. And I knew he was going to go and buy a bottle of wine with that money. And I said, well, you need to get a bus fare. Well, it's a hard one. When I gave the guy the money and walked away and watched him cross the road and go into the bottle shop. So it's one of those situations where you kick yourself and think, you know, why didn't I give him some better advice? He wouldn't have liked what I said if I said, no, you know, I think I've got a really good idea what you're going to do with that money. Maybe I should buy you a hamburger and walk you home. Over.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, that at the time it was appreciated or felt appreciated at the time, and it's something that I enjoy doing. So for me, that was a win-win anyway.
Okay, can I just add a little bit more? Sort of, because maybe I should go a little deeper with this. Because it's difficult to talk about it because it's so big in a sense. But my general impression at the moment is similar to what Stacey said. So many people are broken, it's a strong word, but you know, there's so much psychological suffering all over the world, and also a sense of being distracted, of having a short attention span, of having not so much time and energy available. So it's very difficult to find a space which is just spacious enough to be able to think through some of these issues in a way where we can really look at some real solutions. So said differently, the global issues which are always at the back of all these conversations, the big issues, they probably can't be solved by any of the traditional ways of thinking, and maybe even the way we are used to talking about it. Maybe there's something really radically new that is needed, and so that if you want to have a serious conversation about it, you need to have a lot of time, a lot of space, and you need to formulate whatever you formulate, if you have some visions, very well. And you need to be able to say things that sound almost crazy for a while, and perhaps we need to then be able to sit with that, because at least I feel in the back of my mind, I see a way out of this mess. And I think many of the others feel that way too. When I listen to Doug, for example, describe your system, Tammy, I feel it's like you have that same vision in the back of your mind, but it's this very, very big thing. And that we don't have a language for it at all. So, and this is what, one of Doug's issues, isn't it? That, you want to renew the language and not take on board these old notions. And at the same time, how do we combine that with not throwing the baby out with the bathwater? And at the same time, we're a part of these systems and these concepts. They're such a big part of us. So, and if we just throw them away, that's wrong too. So somehow we need to find a place where we can somehow at the same time accept what is here already and sort of pragmatically just begin with what is, and together with that really build this incredibly huge vision of a completely different kind of society, different kind of system. So it feels like we need to have space both for this really, what is really true here and now, what's reality, what do we know to be facts, like this empirical, rigorous scientific honesty, Colin, brings that sometimes, and combine that with this big visionary point of view that we can build out of that. What is possible in 100 years, what's possible in 1,000 years, like what are the really great opportunities, which of course is where I feel that permaculture, what David Middlemiss, for example, brought in, is one of those signs of what's possible. And I remember he said, there's people already doing this stuff. They're doing amazing stuff. Why don't we focus on that? And it's such an important point. So it's like, at the same, we have to embrace what's already here with all our traumas and grief and, confusions and attention deficit or whatever, and weird stuff. And then also have space for truly bold thinking, like thousands of times bolder than anything we know until now. So it's like, where is that space? It's like, that's because in the normal day-to-day life, there just isn't space for those kind of conversations. So yeah, I want to throw that in too. So maybe that also adds some more substance to this issue.
Some people have a difficulty with permaculture if they live in a complex units and and people get up them even if they plant a tree in the yard. But if you can get out into the bush, it'll be great to have a permaculture garden growing. You can lease land from a farmer, and that'll be my project, my pet project on my bucket list. Over.
Josh?
Can't see the screen, so I apologize. Is this a good time?
Yeah.
Okay, I got inspired by what Glenn just said, and it reminded me of something Dr. Cornell West, who's a great orator and speaker and inspiration to me, at least in my life, is helping each other self-actualize is what I'm hearing. Is we've got so much talent. I mean, look at the souls that are here on this call right now and the ones that have popped in and out, like David Middlemiss, et cetera, et cetera. I just touched base with a gentleman who's not in the GCC, but in the circle of GCC, William Graham. He's a Scotsman who's quite inspirational to myself. So I missed him last night, but I try to touch base with him. And I haven't talked to Aaron Perlmutter in quite a while. I have no idea what he's up to. Ever since our group, the Practical Knowledge Ecology, I just didn't want to do the Bitcoin stuff. So I just stopped talking to Aaron because I just don't care about Bitcoin or Stellar or XML coins. I just want that to go away. But yada, 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 I do love Aaron, and I love him as a soul, not for what he's doing, but who he is as a person. And I want to help each other self-actualize, and including, I need the support from you guys to help me self-actualize. And I think if we can focus on what that word really means, which is getting the best out of our soul and what we have to offer, like what you were saying, Stacy, really resonated with me earlier. I know how hard you work. I've talked to you on the phone. I know how good your heart is and how I want you to self-actualize. And same with you, Doug. I was fortunate enough to go into an Enlivening Edge meeting with Doug and watch how him and Will and everyone is working together. And there's just so much richness. If we can focus on bringing out the best in each other, like Glenn said, it's, we don't know what the systems are going to be, but just helping to bring out the best. And I would even venture to say I have limited time and bandwidth, but I would love to work with Colin. We've been talking for 7 months now, Colin, about doing a broadcasting and podcasting. And I've been lining up people. I did what I said I would do. I lined up a bunch of people for podcasting. I'm doing it on my own, but it'd be more fun to do it with you and anyone else that wants to.
Yeah, I see you definitely in that role. You have a space holding ability, and I think you would do well. Like Gumdrops Rogan, you know what I mean? It's
I'm trying. I just got off the phone with a good friend of mine from Hollywood, and talking to her, and I just been trying to reconnect with all the souls that I know that are doing amazing things, and I've been listening to them and saying, hey, do you mind if I record this on Otter? And then pressing record, which is the pre-meeting before the podcast, but then taking that to say, okay, this would make a good podcast, and then checking to making sure that they have a good microphone and a good internet connection. So that's the due diligence I've been doing in the background, Colin, is getting the people into a database, what's their time frame, what's their connection, and then checking in every 2 weeks. And that takes time. It's been taking about 4 or 5 months now, but I think I have at least 7 or 8 lined up. So I'm ready to do that. And I feel like if we could do that with each other, we've always talked about it, but we did a little bit of that deep dive, but we could just do that with each other. Like Glenn's saying, what we have right now is each other. So if we do those deep dive podcasts with each other, that is at least a way to know what each other wants to work on, because then we can just watch it and signal to each other, hey, I talked to Colin for an hour and a half. and he blew my mind. And if you want to listen to that, I condensed it down to 45 minutes. So you don't have to hear the half an hour of us fooling around making music. You can cut that out. And
Exactly. At least
I
until we're practiced.
exactly. So I just think it's a factor of we have each other, and that's enough. And we can introduce each other to the rest of the world, and then we meet more people, and it just grows from there. It's just, that's a family, that's a tribe, that's a group, whatever you want to call it. It's a thing. It's something. I don't know if it's a GCC thing, but it's a thing. So sorry, I'm just rambling. I thank you for the inspiration, Glenn. And I one last thing before I stop rambling is, self-actualizing means when you really try your best, and whether it's good enough or not, or you have blocks or it doesn't work, you push past that to try even harder again. To me, that's what self-actualizing is you try as best you can at that moment in time, and then you try again, and then you try again. And if you do that at least 5 or 6 times, you'll definitely be a more self-actualized person than the first time, if you give it your best. And that's all we can do. I don't think we can do any better than that as human beings. I'm complete. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. I just say that I think just being here is kind of getting ready. It's depending on what you need to get ready. So that's been a theme of mine, getting ready. But there's a certain time when you have to just go with the flow and learn from your mistakes. But I don't think you should jump in full-heartedly. So I like a little more definition around things. So I have a few different ideas of projects and things that could be sprouted. And depending on time, like you say, and feedback from others, things start to grow more. But we can point back to I think the theme here today is trying to get into the essence of somebody who really wants to put forward, how do we facilitate that, or how do we allow them to see that they are worthy to get ready? How do you present in a way that's not misunderstood? I think my word for this adventure would be under the umbrella of understanding. Everything is towards trying to understand, whatever color that takes. And if you need the scientific method to understand, you do. And if you need to, be empathetic and stand back and learn from your mistakes to understand, that it's all here for me to do that. I find it difficult to have influence, especially when I'm not really intending to influence. So, you have to be deliberate about asking for a little bit of stage to say, I'd like to, try to stand this up, and, what do you guys think of this thing I got here? And if you come, I think, to this kind of a forum and think you have the answers, you might have the answers for something, but you're going to bounce. So it's a way to integrate and to learn how to express and get ready. I think I did a pictoria of the getting ready map, which turned into the quest. But it's all, that's kind of what I have to give, as in trying to visualize what it is I'm trying to say, to understand and get ready to prepare to do whatever comes next for that emergence, right? And allow these things to happen. It is a matter of alignment and skill levels, and that means that there's room for everybody, but in appropriate scope. So you have to kind of know what the scope of what you're doing. And if you get off track, then you might feel like you're not appreciated, or you misunderstood what was actually happening. I know that definitely happened at the PKE, and there was a large event that was supposed to take place. A lot of people were supposed to participate, and in the end, it was like a practice for a practice of something where, I don't know. It was definitely a lot of misunderstanding, and I was surprised at that. Maybe some of what Stacy's referring to, I don't know. I know she put a lot into that. So, it's definitely that alignment, that feedback loop, and trying to understand for me. And we can definitely talk some more, Josh, about how to get OBS to produce some things, but just having a podcast is enough to start to get the interest going in the direction that you want to explore. I was even thinking one version of a production would be where you're doing stills, and then you're talking in behind, then you move the picture to something else instead of just keeping one picture up. You keep the story going, old school. Low bandwidth, I don't know, but anyway, there's lots of things we can talk about there. But I think it is, we don't have time to do it here, but we can definitely cast out our our put our worm in the water, worm on the hook, or whatever, how do you say it, plant the sprout and say, it's over here, please don't step on it, let's talk about it next week if we could, just a little bit, and not monologue, but refresh, and be interested in what we're doing. One thing I notice naturally happens is people's health and the weather. Those things we have a knack of knowing instinctively. And so, I'm a bit like Glenn in that regards. I kind of pull back from getting into the personal stuff, and I'll yap all day about building a project, how I can be of service. But when it comes to, where do I come from, and what do I think specifically about me today, I don't really get into that too much. I might, get into politics and religion a little bit, but, that's, at the end of the day, that's not really what I'm doing. So focusing on what it is we might want to do, like Glenn said, and following through. And I hope I have a theme going, but I don't want to be so dry as to just keep banging the same drum, But I guess it's a lot of things for different people. And I take a lot of alignment with some of the things that everybody said here at one point in time, but Sam in particular, where he says that we're basically trying to coexist, and we may be in a bit of an unaware, privileged position to come here and do this today. We're not perfect, but we've managed to get some safety, security, and time to meet, and that is, I think Stacy hit on that as well. For certain people, that's a luxury to actually be here. I don't take it for granted that I'm here meeting with these people, and anything can happen, right? And to not try to wrestle it or force it in a direction, but to let it naturally happen. And that's kind of what I'm asking Doug as another leading question. Like, do you find it's a different mode in in Living Edge, and the different groups that you're in? Do they each have their own culture to them, or do you think you bring yourself to each one the way you are? I would say you bring yourself the way you are. Anyway, I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, I pretty much do me everywhere. How that expresses or manifests or affects or contributes can be different in different contexts, which has a lot more to do with the nature of the collaborations in those contexts. So, and it's a good question. It's sort of worth going a little deeper into that from the standpoint of here. There are contexts where I feel more affective, more valuable, or more contributive in terms of my being there, my contributing, my responding, reacting, whatever it is doing in those contexts translates into. There are places where I feel greater, I'm of greater value and impact and contribution. And I also experience, others seem to experience same. And that's not same in terms of, and they value me as much as I'm valuing what I'm contributing. It's that they experience their own value and self. I love Josh's, invoking of this idea of actualization. That there is sort of a collective. There are collective levels of actualization that emerge for the individuals in different groups. And now that you sort of have driven me there, the thing I'm most interested in is how to raise that, how to increase that. And and it's obviously not in my control to affect or increase somebody else's experience. The only thing I bring is me. The only thing I have dominion control over is me. So I can bring me, and I'm there in service to the collective and to hopefully adding value to that, whatever the it is that that collective is pursuing. And there are some environments, circles, and contexts, communities, and/or groups or collaborations that are more generative, productive in the ways that I know you guys are very fond of being. and there are some that are less, that are much more frustration and purpose for folks. And that's really the central, most important focus for me is that question, like what makes it better, and what jams it up or causes issues and problems. And the only takeaway I have to offer, and then I'm complete, is that the ones that, at least for me, I sense and feel are most generative, most productive, are the ones where everybody involved places a premium on presence connection over agenda on an individual basis, and comes from sort of generosity of curiosity to understand, as opposed to imperative to be understood. And so, the corollary inquiry is, what makes people feel that imperative, that prioritization of self-attachments and being understood over being in service to, because I see it as a real block and cost to the world when people are, effectively pissing up wind at each other in competition rather than in cooperation. And I'm complete.
Thanks, Doug. That was a wonderful answer.
Yeah, I really like that. I also feel very much that it's the times when it's been this emphasis on presence with a curiosity. That seems to be one of the magic formulas. I do wonder if it's worth going a little deeper into this issue of throwing the baby out with the bathwater versus really trying to be free from the, let's call it, old industrial frame, because I have this strong sense that this isn't just this group. It's like all over society. There's so many who have these incredibly beautiful ideas, and at the same time they kind of feel disconnected from the normal system, while at the same time they're actually a part of it and need it, or we all need to not throw away, what has been created so far. There's this angry, almost revolutionary spirit that comes up, and I feel it inside too. It's like this almost flame-throwing a rebel who just wants to say, oh, this is all bullshit, let's just break it all and start anew. And at the same time, I just know that that's madness, and it's going to lead to really bad things. and that somehow we have to find a way to, be able to take on board what's already here and what's already been achieved, even if it's from, let's call them the evil capitalists or whatever, or whatever group you don't identify with. Is it possible to come to a place where we can really, include, transcend and include? I mean, just like Ken Wilber is talking about, but then one thing is talking about it, but can we actually do it? Because it's such powerful emotions here, and it's economic fact. I mean, I just feel this is like this big issue. It's like this big block. It's not just like this all over, like in all the groups I'm a member of that, want to have this beautiful new world. There's this sense of this incredible anger at men, which are directed towards certain groups. It's this anger of, all the bullshit. It's like, I feel it when I see the congressional hearings. I mean, I haven't looked much at it, but I just see a little bit of it. And I just feel so angry. I just want to shout to those guys, grow the fuck up. What the hell are you guys doing? You're just sitting, throwing, criticizing one another. Team blue, team red. You're not even having a serious conversation about anything that matters. It's like, I feel this rage. But yeah, I think you know what I'm saying. It's like, I would love to hear your thoughts, especially Doug, like, because you mentioned this many times about, being free from these old ideas. And, but how can we do that? Like without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, without blaming the 1% or whatever we want to call them, without really demonizing people who are successful. That's another issue of it. Like, if someone's successful, they get demonized immediately simply because they're successful by large parts of this, alternative thinking networks, one could say. The other one, throw that in. And I might lose contact for a short while. I don't know. Anyway, that's what I wanted to throw in as well.
That a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello? Yes. I've run into this too, and this being what I would call generosity of leaning in to understand. And I think understanding and being understood are kind of a cyclical thing. So first you have to listen together, like, and maybe even define what you mean by certain terms so that they don't trigger. And then try to be understood by having somebody understand what you're saying and have them repeat it. That's what steel manning is, so that you're actually talking about the same thing. And it's very, very complicated when you add in the different human variables and, space and time variables. And time is in history, old people, young people, different parts of the planet people, people with grudges, people who are not privileged enough to sit and philosophize about why they're so angry. There's such a, so, kind of my frustration is, even with our group, I haven't found a way. I have with Glenn, a little bit with Stacy, started to with Doug, but it kind of it receded because, Doug wants a little more results in the works before he's going to be involved. I can understand. And things are happening in everybody's lives. So, but yeah, to try to have a decent attempt to find the adapters as you're having the conversation, moving the topic forward in an important subject that you want to talk about, without projecting on the other person and bringing in your biasms. And when you do, they get flagged and say, well, that's interesting. I think that's a little biased. Why don't we flag that and give you a bias flag right here? You can have it. You might be right. Wisdom is won the hard way. So if you're biased towards this opinion, why? And I find more times than not, there's something underlying that as you move forward. So it is a complicated conversation to have a conversation or a dialogue with somebody. It's you can be lighthearted, tell jokes, talk about the weather, but if you really want to get underlying what it is you might be trying to say about the 1 versus the 99%, let's unpack that. What do you mean? It's I think the one is a bit culpable. I don't like the idea of people who are Machiavellian and just greedy and just want more, right? I don't think people here in this group are actually of that type. In fact, maybe we're more volunteering, and when we talk about making a profit, it's like, oh, you're abusing the space here trying to make money. So I don't know. There's a lot of different, if we were in a business group right now, it would be, are we playing the market correctly? We'd be talking about all kinds of different space we're in. It's a different context. Here it's wide open. So that's kind of like, for someone who's trying to look at a way to build a tool to help people with different worldviews understand each other, it's quite a fascinating thing to how do you present that and not make it sound crazy that I know I'm speaking the obvious here, but let's give the obvious a try. Anyway, it's interesting. Thank you.
Sam's diagrams have already laid out a sort of skeleton of what could be in the future, quite an exciting venture. So I'd love to see it when we are working on Trello and other boards with our ideas, putting them towards a solutions page. And I think Joshua's got administration privileges on the GCC website. We could add a page there of our project solutions, suggestions and ideas. Over.
Josh actually owns the GCC website and pays, I think, partially or collectively $50 a month for it. So, that's something that, I don't think he's been reimbursed for. I'm sure he's running other projects, but at the same time, this has been a 2-year experiment in generosity that we really haven't gotten down the nuts and bolts on something. Some people are moving ahead. I think Lucy went and did some things. Dave Techsmith is doing some things. Michael Jawasowitz is doing some things. Jawasowitz. I'm real good with that one. Sorry, Michael. Man, you'd think I'd have it better. John Keldon. There's a whole bunch of people that are doing things that we could highlight, Josh. As in, let's go down the 14 groups and give you the skinny on what they're doing, and it would be valuable. So I think that barn raising that I missed a couple of weeks ago when everybody was in there, there was a lot of links put in there, and I started to produce that, and then I get OBS set up, and then somebody would join the meeting, and then all of a sudden the window would be skewed, and that person that I was highlighting was gone. And I said, well, you can't set up OBS with all this variability. Maybe I need the OBS patch files themselves. So who's got administrative Zoom accounts that can share those individual voice files and those individual video files, so that we could produce those and put them into a searchable database and pull into an OBS project and actually produce things. And that's what Josh was getting at yesterday, that we really don't have access to that in an efficient way where we would think about moving it forward. So as we emerge, I think these questions now, which is what Sam was saying, maybe it's been a little bit chaotic, because now is the right time for these questions. So where are the ways that we can, what are the ways we can produce, and if we want to produce, if that's what I'm kind of feeling is my blockage and frustration, and also fun and enjoyment. For somebody else it might be something different. But I definitely think having the ability to mark and park sections of a video in real time and have those time codes available to put through a script that could automatically generate a raw copy of some good stuff, individuals clips, is almost like having that, but if you had the Zoom files that you could do that to, then it'd be even higher quality. So anyway, I don't want to bog people down, but there's a lot of moving pieces in trying to be part of having Sprouts here and following through, and the time involved, and the effort involved, and the expense, which is where we started with Josh. Josh is putting in $50 a month. I don't know what percentage that's GCC, but you can guess at least a couple $100. Sam's putting in €3 a month, I think, into the group on a reciprocal thing. And I think having some decent little projects that we're working on and ways to pay for it. We have a website, we're going to pay for it, we value it, then maybe we could use that more than Facebook. Josh has tried it with Basecamp and some other things. So there's some equation or value in reciprocity and alignment and energy, desires, sprouthood, whatever that maybe could see this through. And Alex is right to mention Trello, because we all kind of agreed to at least pick Trello because it's got enough. It's got enough that we could try there. Not Facebook is good for publicity, quick talk, maybe harvesting some things, but I think something you want to live more than 2 months should probably go into Trello. For us, it's a proposal. Maybe we should have a Friday experiment on what is Trello and what's there already, and what's interesting in Trello, and maybe focus our efforts there. I don't know. Maybe that's a really bad idea, but I think I don't think it's from lack of trying. I think it's from lack of focusing on what the quest is that you're trying to do and what you're actually asking for. Our word clouds should get closer to our meaning, not farther away. If you took a word cloud of everything we say, I think that's the new thing Sam's doing. So if we look at that word cloud and it's got the words that you want in there, then it's working. And can each one of us have our own word cloud? We can if we were plugged into the Zoom transcripts or Otter or whatever. So it's very interesting. A lot of things we could do, slow steps, and in a few months we could have something interesting. Anyway, I'll leave it there. It is a block, but it's also an opportunity.
There's an interesting point about the cloud, word cloud, because the AI can do that automatically. The AI is doing that anyway in the background. So it's the person who wants to fish for the information and dig into it can do that with the algorithms and the Python scripts and the languages they use for coding. Programmers like Colin, you can check out the apps available for all that plugins you use on your browser and all that. They can give you a visualization of what the conversation has been about, the major topics and where it was heading and who was saying what. The most color-coded things are, Joshua was talking about it the other day, the color mapping, heat mapping, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it would be a different effect in, like, for example, as Doug was saying, in one group where they're more project-based, the word cloud would look different than in maybe a GCC Unblocking where it could be about almost anything. So I think in this forum, it's less formatted, more dynamic. So it's interesting to have these kind of feedback tools. Other forums, AI is just like another horse in the farm. It's not AI is that special. It's just something that can facilitate in certain ways. It's still a matter of curating and knowing what it is, which in the end is producing. Or you just put all the stuff out there raw and hope, at least there's some value in that as well. So I've always looked at how do we increase the value of it in terms of focusing on if you're on a quest. And if you're not on a quest, you can join in somebody else's quest. What do these quests look like? And probably, I think a lot of success would be noted in the fact that in looking at your quest, you might join up with a bigger quest that people are already doing that. So you might say, you know what, I'm going to hook my ship to these guys, you know, join this thing. So, you know, I think it's a level of education of what's going on. I don't know. Maybe you've got something original but in any event, you're echoing your focus, and or you know, that's a project mindset, but there's also the support mindset of how do I get started in contributing? How do I find out what my gift to share might be, right? And you can also go through that stage of reinventing yourself or trying something new. So there's a lot. Anyway, I'm very geeky and stuck in my ways, so it's almost like I don't have a lot of free will in this. But yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Stacy?
So my quest is more universal in general, and I want to go back to what Glenn said earlier about what is possible and not having the space, because I think that, again, I'm not just focused on the great minds and the inventors. I'm focused on just the average minds and regular people. And I think that, you know, we are born creative individuals. You know, the one thing that seems to go down in terms of the general population is the amount in which we're allowed to use our imagination and our creativity. Let me try to focus a little bit. The what if question, I feel like I agree with Glenn. If we had more time to ask these what if questions and to really allow our imagination to go to those places. When he talks about the baby, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, what about if our question was, what small thing would you change on this to make a difference? That would allow people, and I'm talking about in a meeting setting, to explore those things in a safe way. Because I feel like we've been taught to restrain those muscles instead of to flex those muscles of creativity and imagination. So like, for example, a while back, I put out the question, it was months ago, of what would an economy designed to support cultural creatives look like? And it got a lot of feedback. And my purpose was to get people thinking, well, how would things look differently? How would the job sectors be different? But it was more an exercise to just start thinking and to see where things could be tweaked instead of going from one system all the way to a different system. We're not really trained, like I said, it's like the obvious things that we just take for granted. And maybe the obvious things are the ones that we need to change, but we're not even thinking about those things. So, I mean, I'm jumping all around here, but something else is coming to mind. I remember at one point, Colin and a few other people, they really felt it was important to have personal profiles. And pretty much everybody agreed profiles would have been a great thing. My feeling has always been, how do we add an element of fun and socialization into everything that we do? I had wanted to create those profiles together for example, where, let's say I'm sorry, I'm trying, let me rein myself in. What I'm really trying to say is that sometimes it's productive to say, Doug, what do you think about what Alex just said? Or Alex, what do you think about what Colin just said? Just because it gives people permission to maybe say something they wouldn't have said before. And that permission is necessary, maybe not to the self-actualized people or the people that are really good at opening up and saying what they feel, but the people that aren't really good at that. They're the ones that need it maybe set into the protocol an opportunity to even ask themselves, what do I think? I mean, that's why I love check-in so much, because it's like, it's up to you to say, no, I don't want to check in, instead of the other way around, which I think makes it easier for people that aren't as good at thinking about, not so much thinking about, but expressing what they've thought about. And sometimes that just leads to them not thinking about it at all. I've met a lot of people who I'll ask a question. They're like, I never thought about that. I'll be like, what do you think about it now? And they'll go deep, and a lot of stuff will really start to come out. And again, part of my quest or my mission is to help bring what's under the surface to the surface so that it can be transformed. I'm sorry if I was all over the place with that.
I think one of the things about the profiles you mentioned, which is very interesting, is that different there's differences in how prepared people are to take part in that type of a process. Like, you know, I think we did a Friday experiment one time where we all broke out into chat rooms, and it was about, you know, going over our profiles and our you know, LinkedIn accounts or these kinds of things. So, you know, there's different flavors of it, but I think at the very least, you know, I would encourage people, like I've heard Glenn and Stacy say this before, and I guess my first thing is as you're going through the quest is to get those documents together that clearly state, maybe it's a Medium article or 2 or 3 that you write. I know there's a lot of Facebook posts that you've both written, but is there anything that you've curated to live on its own that could, you know, present yourself? You could have several of them for different contexts, but, you know, I guess a landing page, as it were.
But that's exactly my point, though. What about if there was a completely different way of doing it? What about if I just said to everybody here, tell me what is the one song that means more than anything to you, and tell me why? That's a great way to get to know somebody. Like, and to me, that's a playful thing, and it may not lead to a profile right away. But if the first step is getting to know people, there are different kinds of questions we can ask that aren't so serious, that are more enjoyable.
I think that's a great idea. I was in service to and not but, and I think we can each gain, I think, here a basic skill of being able to present ourselves. And it's been difficult for me to say exactly what it is I'm doing because it's at different levels, different people, different things. But it's about understanding communication, and very much to what I think Glenn or Alex was just saying about traveling through communication so that you can interactively add to it. So you don't have to be wait till somebody includes you. You know, you're already contributing to a trail. In software world, that would be you know, join a project online, get a copy of the code, learn what's going on, and then maybe ask how you could contribute, and then do a pull request, and then the person in charge of the code would say, you know what, I'm going to put your changes in my code. You know, so that's a pattern that's, you know, right there for software developers. You don't have to ask how, it's just which, you know, which project do I want to help with in doing that? You know, which language do I want to use? You know, so you're already choosing through a list of things. So all I'm saying quickly, I'll back up myself, is that to add more human value to it, yes, what movies do you like? What music do you like? That kind of thing. That's all great. But can you give a 3 to 5 minute document on what it is you're trying to do? And maybe you'd have one for what you see the GCC is and what your contribution is here. Maybe it could be even just as narrow as what you'd like to do for barn raising. Or I ask Doug, you know, what's his MO? And he says, well, pretty well it's the same everywhere I go. So if I ask Doug, you know, in 2 minutes, could you tell me what it is you're about? I'm sure he could. And I'm sure he could give us a 20-minute version too. So, you know, I think giving each other that skill up front, you know, I think would be a great value. And I've mentioned that to Glenn because he goes on and on about these beautiful things. And I said, can you bounce that down to a 5-minute version? I don't think I've seen it yet, but I don't have one either. So to be fair,
You're getting perilously close to where I live, which is a lot of the stuff that represents the starting place for people isn't real as a starting place for 99% of the population of our planet. You know, the vast bulk of the global population isn't literate. They can't read. So, and at the risk, okay, so I'm very measured in giving voice to stuff that treads into the judgmental frame. Personally, I relate to that as me being self-indulgent and lazy, because usually it ends up mapping to something gratuitous and relieving for me. But it's projective, it's at somebody's expense, and it's judgment-based. But at the risk of doing that, I'm about to do that. So I find a lot of folks in these spaces, mind you, what does it take as a prerequisite for every single person who's here? First of all, you have to be affluent enough to have a computer and connectivity in an environment from which you can actually speak and be seen and see. So you need a screen. And you need a relatively significant level of education and sophistication to run all those tools. And probably you can add literacy and foundational educational stuff. And then you actually have to have the time and the space and the place to divert to doing this. And, you know, that racks up to, at least for me, a whole bunch of stuff I'm nothing but grateful for. But it's privilege with a capital P relative to 99% of the 8 billion people that populate the planet. So if I'm really interested in global challenges, collaboration, and service to solutions for the planet, which is 8 billion people, and the biome of other living things, plant and animal, above and beyond that, and the geological substrate on which all of that exists, and atmospherics and all that. If I'm really like thinking about that, then, you know, getting lost in the tools and Trellos and platforms and all of that stuff becomes really, really, really insanely self-indulgent. It's like, how do you help 8 billion people get to a feeling of safety when 7.99999% of them are living in abject fear, terror, hunger, or deprivation? And how do you do that in a way that isn't at the expense of all the other living things on the planet and the ecology that we live in that sustains all that? And so the David Middlemises of the world start to loom a lot larger for me in terms of, you know, being at the coalface of that question. Like confronting on the ground in real time, what's the what? And whence goes us with all of the privilege, goes us with a huge amount of power, intrinsic, explicit, direct, and immediate power and resources to create, to generate, to contribute, to help, to drive, and to motivate, all that stuff. Like we have a lot of power at our disposal. What do we do with it? Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, not to sound like a comic book, but with great privilege comes great responsibility. And what you do with it is you do your best. And that's what you do. You can't help everybody, but you try to help the people around you, and that's what you do. That's the smart person problem. How do I help 8 billion people? Well, you don't. You help one, and that's yourself. And then once you are in that position where you can give your power, your privilege to another, each one teach one. It's an ancient African saying, Ubuntu. We all walk together. You teach that one person, and then that one person, they have the responsibility. They are now privileged. If they weren't privileged before with your time and your attention, they are after your time and attention. After that time and attention, it's up to them. They can keep it themselves or they can pass it on. Each one teach one. But if everybody does that, then it spreads organically, emergently, naturally. I know I'm speaking to the choir, but that's all it is. If we make it more complicated than that, we get stuck in these wicked problems. But if we keep it as simple as, hey, Colin, how's your new job going? Hey, Stacy, how's everything in your life? How can we help you one person at a time? And if I can't help you, Glenn, can you help Doug? Sam, can you help Tammy? That's all we can do. If we just keep it that simple, we get out of the smart people problems and see what effect happens over time. There's no stopping of the clock and saying, hey, did we do what we said we were going to do? You just do it for the rest of your life. You don't ask for recognition or anything. And then at the end of your life, you go on to whatever the next life is. Like, I don't know. I just don't think it's that complicated. I just think you do your best and you help yourself as best you possibly can, and you ask for help when you need it. I don't think it has to be so complicated. I really don't. I don't think we have to create a group or an entity. I personally mentioned yesterday, I want to create an entity that's not me, that I can give to, just so I have a box called the GCC to throw some love into and time and attention into. And I know it's going into a box that's being looked after I pass away. That's all I want to do here with the GCC, is try to steward a collection of love, ideas, opinions, understanding, and put it into a box for the next generation to open up as a gift. With that, I'm complete. Thank you.
Yes, Stacey.
In addition to what Josh just said, I also think that it is very valuable coming online and sharing different ideas. And maybe, I mean, the reason I keep coming back is I want to keep practicing and role modeling the ability to look at different perspectives and to weigh them and to see them differently. I think that's a skill that, using it online, it spreads. And I think that is very valuable.
I think I line right up with that too. We're all holding onto a rope with this one. Yeah, I think the people adapters I talk about are to bring in those differences of context. Some people may have one type of work that they produce, one medium that they use. Let's just say painting. So I go to somebody's house to help them paint, or they're coming. So I know that it's going to be acrylics. But if they don't know about oil paints and water paints, and I start to talk about oil paints and water paints, are they going to be triggered? Are they going to be interested? Are they going to think I'm a liar? Are they, you know, it's that simple, the miscommunications and misunderstandings. So I think the tools to smoothly understand each other, that yes, we're painting and there's different kinds of painting, and we're just going to stick to this kind of painting. So let's not worry about water paints and acrylics. We're just going to stick to oils. And then it can just be that. But if you want it to be more, you may be, you know, maybe your real thing was to start an art gallery and you don't want to paint at all. You just want to meet painters. Who knows? But these are different contexts and the details that really matter. But until you get out of the generalities of art is good and painting is good and we should all have paintings, and why does the capitalist society not allow us to have paintings, is kind of irrelevant. So I think it's really, like Josh said, listening to each other, being very clear on what it is we're trying to present. Maybe what Doug just said earlier, a couple of things. You know, he's had some good runs this meeting. Maybe those could be captured. And he says, I don't want to have a thing on Trello, but maybe that's the thing we could put on Trello. Put that thing. This is Doug. This is how he can help. And, you know, Doug's a valuable part of our group. And here's Doug saying who Doug is. Like, just that easy. Done. Right. So, you know, it's not meant to be strict. It's meant to be useful. And validated by the person, not just my maps of the person, but, you know, the person looks at the map, says, you know, I'd rather you keep that off. I used to do that. You know, Heiner does that. I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. How about this? And yeah, it's an iterative process that takes investment from the people involved. Really. Anyway, that's my rant.
Josh?
Yeah, I was just going to go back to the focus of what we're doing here today, which is unblocking. And because we're coming up to the top of the hour, if anyone is blocked, then we're still have some work to do. So if someone feels blocked, let it out. Let's try to unblock it here. And if we can't unblock it here, reach out to each other and help to unblock it in between this Sunday and the next Sunday. Like I just got a wicked block right now while we were talking. My bandwidth, I have a meeting with a client that I've been waiting 6 months for, and I have 149 gigabytes available, and it ends at 150. So by the end of the day, I'm fucked. So I'm blocked. So I've got to unblock myself for that. But that's my personal thing. But if, as far as a block with the GCC, I don't have a block right now. I feel that, you know, we had a great conversation yesterday, a great conversation on Thursday. Fridays, I'm waiting for my, you know, on the 27th, actually the 28th of the month, I get unblocked with my gigabyte situation. And then I can signal to the group, I'd like to do a help you with your project online Friday experiment. So I feel clear with that. Everyone said that's okay to do. And I can do the first Friday and the second Friday of the month, and I can commit to that because I know I won't be blocked for that. So I'm good. I'm just curious before the end of the hour if anyone else feels blocked, because I think that's your intention, Doug, is to help people with that. So I want to be quiet and just listen and just keep our focus of what we're doing on a Sunday and not carry Thursdays and Saturdays over if they're not a block. And with that, I'm complete. Thank you.
There's an enormous value in having people to talk, get engaged in conversation, because it's not like a chat session or texting. It's got the greater intense value of people being able to share what they're concerned about, why they're concerned about it, and what they want to do. So real people collaborating is one of the reasons, one of the draws that pulls us in. So this is when Glenn was talking about how the greater grander idea can eventuate and emerge from a group like this. I think he's right. It's those people who are engaged enough and want to do the work, like create a web page, just even if it's just to put links on it, so that we've got something online that's informing the others, real people in the group, that it's there and they can look at it, they can click the like button. It's creating data as well. So the more data the AI's got, the better it is able to predict things. So if we can help that along, that's fine, that's great. But we are the informed members of a group already, and we're using our internal intelligence to figure out who's got what, where, and how can we put it to work. It's a matter of me asking, what can I do? When can I do it? What should I do? Why should I do it? When should I do it? Knowing what you've got available too is important. I know where I live and I know what I've got here that I can use. So I'm doing what I can with that. Over.
Can I might lose the connection, just so you know. I think I'm good for a few minutes. Sorry, I fell out. It's battery. When I picked up Trello being mentioned, obviously there is a danger of getting lost in Trello or in any of these systems. So I do acknowledge that. And that, yes, we're obviously very privileged to even be here. At the same time, I really feel that for this group, like if we're going to begin where we are, begin from what is here, it seems to me that for this group, something like Trello is very important. It doesn't have to be Trello. It's got nothing to do with Trello, but okay, that's a place where we now have quite a bit of material. And there's cards. Personally, I love that thing with cards. You can write as much as you want in those cards. That's also very useful. And it feels as though there is a need to give more energy to this movement, because there's a kind of a movement which is still at a very early stage. There seems to be a need to have a group memory. Sam has brought this up many times, and it doesn't really matter where it is. It could be anywhere. It could be Trello, it could be Basecamp, wherever. And it doesn't have to be used by everyone. But if you have at least a few people who can use something like that and put in at least some material relatively regularly, and if that can then be brought back to the videos, to the video conversations, shown in the video conversations, discussed in the video conversations, not all of them, but every now and then there's something in the works. Then there's an interaction between the spoken conversation and the written record. There's a sense that it's not being lost and something is being built. And it doesn't even matter what's being built in a sense. It's more that there's this sense that we're making something, even if it's even just garbage so far, at least we're moving. Yeah, we're moving. Colin, yeah, I think I said what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's really good. And to speak what Josh was talking about, this is unblocking. And, Trello is a little bit intrusive because it's a barn raising thing, but I do see some cross-pollination. And, what kind of blocks have we had this year that we've solved? Which blocks came up that are still unsolved? Are there any lessons learned from just time taking care of things where, people couldn't get along, but just let time pass and things smooth out because they realized that the individual is more important than the argument, perhaps? I feel that with Jazzwinder. He does little things to trigger me, but they're not that important. A couple of crazy posts, but I was blocked on that, and I started a game of discernment based on why Jazz thinks that's effective, and he was kind of poking at the bear with me, and he admitted to it. So I said, well, that's a good, if he wants to poke at me, let's have a little discussion and find out why, like see what's underneath that. But it never went anywheres. So what blocks are still there? Is that considered resolved? Did anybody learn anything from that? Like, I think that would be very valuable for this show. Maybe in the barn raising one, it would have a different kind of an outcome. But at the same time, you're using the same kind of a process to track through, try to follow through, which is what Glenn said at the very beginning, which I agree with, following through on your quest and learning to fall down and get up again, and to, who's really helping you and who just seems to want to help but might need to learn a few things before they can contribute, or or maybe they're way advanced from you and you just don't want to get involved with them. There's these impedance mismatches, and so I think those are the more important things. And in blocking, blocks are caused by these mismatches. I think miscommunication, misunderstanding, all these things. So yeah, I get that kind of a sense that the GCC is kind of growing, and we are being a little more timid in our forcefulness to reach a solution, as opposed to ask questions and say, would this help? Sam said, should we use Trello? Everybody said, yeah, let's use it. So we kind of did, and I'm thinking, well, should we use something for tracking the unblocking sessions? If the blocks, and maybe people would have a whole list of things that are actually blocks that don't come out in the heat of the moment here. Where if we sat down and said, this is the unblocking, not agenda, but idea pool, and somebody comes up with a block and you say, what, we had that block 3 times this year and once last year. Let's see if this helps that person, kind of thing. So a dynamic knowledge repository for blocks. And what caused the block? And someone like me is nerdy enough to try to get into the nuances to try to categorize it, right? But as things just fly by, it's just too much. How do you categorize conversation? How long is it valid? How long is it stale? Anyway, a lot of good stuff that you could do.
Colin, let's work with the cartographer. More work for the cartographer.
We're coming up toward the top of the hour. Last closing thoughts, shares. And since I have the mic, I'll go. That's sort of an interesting idea, Colin. I'm going to cook with that a little bit in terms of whether I'm really gun shy about, creating rabbit holes before something is ripe, because the putting of blocks into that kind of lexicon or, framework has a way of sucking the life out of it, reducing it. And I'm not sure it's meaningful or helpful, because when somebody is triggered, that's an eating, sleeping, living, breathing thing. It's not a, something out of a reference list. That's that's A3 in the grid. I have major issues with that whole phenomenology in our culture as it is. So
would that be ones that dissipate, you mean?
Well, it's just it gets inverted, right? So what's being described gets flattened and reduced to some kind of a binary scalar simplification, and it's the diagnostic code for psychiatric disorders is the greatest living injustice and example of that in our cultural and academic history. It's just a crock of shit.
One step away from judging, right?
Well, it's judging. It's it's the post office box imposition on human beings, and but I'd love to push limits and boundaries in thinking about an approach that would be meaningful, emerging out of the way triggers actually work and are experienced, and the effects and impacts that they have, and seeing whether we could evolve something new that wouldn't be, physician's desk reference, wouldn't be psychiatric codes, that would be more appropriate and more human, and potentially translatable into a tool that glows and that uses colors and that gives real-time synchronous readings of people as they're doing themselves, which is a fantasy I've had for a long time. Like if I saw Glenn's square start to glow a particular color because it's picking up on something, and everybody can go, yo, Glenn, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. So with that, I'm complete. Anybody else with final wrap-ups? And then you'll be free to go about your business.
Yeah.
My
I just
final-
want to. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm just going to follow Doug because my final wrap up would be to just say, if we saw that green going around Glenn, let's remember that there's more than one reason it could be green, because that to me is the biggest issue. That immediate assumption that we know why it's green because it has to be, and it does not. And with that, I'm complete. Sorry, Glenn.
Yeah. I just wanted to add my voice a little to what you brought there, Doug, and also thanks for expressing this concern about reducing something living to something stale and dead, because that concern I so much feel, and that is probably the number one reason why I don't write more than I do, and has really hindered me from contributing to the GCC and to all of this. So that is a block for me, because on the one hand, I see there's a need to bring in the written words, the diagrams, the databases, and at the same time, there is this fear, worry, concern about reducing something, making it stale. So I think I'll just end by just asking this question: what is the way we can do this without it getting stale? Maybe it's just a limiting belief. Maybe there's a totally different way to use a database. Maybe it can be a really living thing. And I feel that the solution is somewhere in that direction.
I think Glenn said goodbye, whether he liked it or not.
Yep. Anybody else before we sign off, Alex?
We all have a superpower of some description, and it's up to the people in the group to foster each other's superpower, and it helps to bring it out, because the rich history of our experience in our lifetimes has built us up to where we are now, and all that accumulates in what we produce now in the co-creation, co-visioning endeavors that we're indulging in. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for being here, and me too. Check in.
I think it's a wrap. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Alex, your Monday. And thank you all. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your being here and bringing your presence and your time and your attention and your gifts. And Colin, maybe you've catalyzed something. And yeah, I have a feeling we should revisit this. Bye all.